Let's look at what he did. He left the heavenly realms. He left the worship of all the angelic and of all the universe and came down into tribulation. He gave himself to be wounded, used, beaten, bruised, slandered, accused, hung on a cross, bleeding and dying so that we could be one with the Father. But what do we want? We want to leave tribulation, fly away to the heavens, and have a party in the sky while all of the earth is burning and going to hell? I don't think so. The issue is we have to reconfigure our entire mindset to become what we were really created to be. And actually, we're moving in that direction right now. We're becoming what we've always been. And inside of that is the principle of the eternal now. Amen. Father, I thank you and I praise you that the seed of these words has fallen on good ground. I give you praise and honor and blessing that they're going to produce a fruit and a multitude of fruit, and that fruit is going to last for all eternity because there's no beginning and no end to it. We thank you and praise you as we open up the Q&A session right at this present moment. And we give you praise for those who have been led and drawn and directed here by your Spirit alone, that they're here by your divine design to begin to function in everything that we're talking about. We give you praise for it in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay. Sorry, guys. Okay, so now we have to wait to start to record the next thing, or?
Nope, we'll go straight into it.
Okay.
So, okay. Do you want to stop sharing your screen? Then we can sort of go into the Q&A.
Sorry. I have to get this thing back up again. Okay. I'm going to have to stretch it. It looks like I can't get it to go back up.
It's just a matter of, just stopping your screen, I guess. Stop sharing.
Yeah. I'm trying to do that, but I have to get the screen to open large enough to stop.
That's all right. I've done it. I've done it for you.
Okay, I got it.
Okay, great. Well, we'll now go straight into the next session. So thank you, Nancy, for sharing all that amazing stuff. It was awesome. Let's be open for anyone to ask questions relating to anything that we've done. Obviously, there's 4 of us. We have different perspectives. We come from different things. We don't fall out with each other and we don't argue, but we do share the way we see things, and that's okay. We're not saying everyone has to agree with everything that's been said by anybody, but you have total liberty to have your own opinion. But if we disagree, let's be respectful and honoring to each other, because no one is sharing something they don't believe. What I've believed in the past, I've shared. Sometimes now I know it isn't true. So just because I shared something before, honestly, where I was at the time, I'm now in a different place. I wasn't trying to deceive anyone in the past. I just believed that. Now I believe other things. So I think we're in a place where we can be able to engage, open up discussion, share things, but let's just keep it pleasant. So let's throw it open. If anyone's got anything, you can use the chat to put a question in, or you can put your hand up. Okay, we've got Lilia and Philip there. You've got your hands up first, I can see, and then Kelly's got her hand up after that.
Hi, I had a question. I have, from time to time, I have dreams, and I find myself either seeing women or children who are in the being kept as sexual slaves, and I see them, and any pointers or any feedback I can get as far as if you had any of those dreams, and what do you do, or how do you interact, engage on those things?
I would like to be first to answer that. People come to me all the time with their dreams. And I take their hand and I say, I want to ask you one question. Was it a dream or was it reality? Because the word says, this down here is the vapor, that up there is the real. So many times when somebody sees something like you do, and this is not a prophetic word, this is an opinion, okay? When you see the women and children that are being trafficked, the reason why the Lord is revealing that to you is because part of what's on your scroll is for you to stand in a place, a spiritual place called the gap, and intercede for those people that you're seeing there. Actually, what I do when I have things like that happen is I stand in the gap, which is not, we call standing in the gap prayer and intercession, but it's actually a spiritual position. And I begin to call to those people, spirit to spirit, for them to be filled with the hope. And then I address the trafficker, because I can speak to the trafficker in the spirit. I don't even have to be there. I can call that trafficker into relationship with Jesus and release the love of Jesus over him. And that will actually produce a greater manifestation than us just praying in words because words are very, very limiting. So when you stand in the overlapping place, which I call the gap, and you release the love of God to the trafficker, and you release hope into the hearts of those that are without hope, because what we're called to be is light in the midst of the darkness, hope to those that are without hope, love to those who don't know love. We're called to be those things. So the reason why the Lord is showing you that in your dream world, the word says God speaks to man in the night, in a dream, in a vision, while his soul is sound asleep. And one of the reasons why he speaks to us so much in our dream world is because he's wanting to show us his plans and unravel for us the understanding of what's written on our scroll. So the reason why he speaks to us at the night in the spirit while our soul is sound asleep, because our soul almost always will argue our way out of what he's wanting us to do, because it contains our rationale and our intellect, which oftentimes will actually, until we surrender so completely to the Lord that our soul comes into alignment with his. So what you're seeing in the night is very important. The second thing I want to say about the dream world, a lot of people say, well, I don't dream. And I say, yes, you do. It's a scientific fact that mankind, as a general rule, dreams 85% of their sleeping hours. The problem is all that we remember is what we get when we go right in down to REM and what happens when we come up out of REM, because that's because our soul is beginning to wake up then. So our memory is beginning to wake up. Everything that happens while you're in REM, you have no memory of. And that is the time when your spirit hyper activates and you can do great exploits. You can go in the realms of the spirit and bring all those people out. So anyway, I'm just saying, when you have a dream that is disturbing like that, it's because the Lord is showing you that part of your mandate from him is to become a deliverer for those that are in bondage to the slave trade. Is that okay?
Yes, I do have had other dreams too, and in some of those, I find myself in Asia or different continents, and I am pulling a woman or somebody, either protecting her or showing her the way out of something that either she was being, somebody set her up or something to kill her or something of that nature. But I and the other dreams, I just didn't know how to approach them or what to do with them. And anyway.
Actually, I just want to give you a thought about this. It's something for you to think on. You were actually there. Okay. I have people all the time that come to me, and in one conference alone, I had 18 different people come up to me and say, I was sick and I was dying in my bed with cancer. And I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning and you were hovering over my bed. And the next morning I woke up and I was completely healed. Or I wanted to have a baby, but I had to have a hysterectomy and all of my parts were removed. And she said, I woke up one morning in the middle of the night, and you were hovering over my bed. And suddenly my uterus grew back and my tubes grew back, and I had a baby out of my own body. But see, I have no conscious memory of those things taking place. Actually, until people come up and tell me that, I don't even know that I'm doing it, because most of it happens when I'm in REM. And when I'm in REM is when my spirit is hyperactivated. And actually, we have all been doing great exploits in the invisible realm since we were in our crib. The problem is we don't remember what we're doing because our memory is in our soul, and our soul is sound asleep when our spirit hyperactivates. So go ahead. I don't want to labor too long on that question because I could go on about that for hours.
Okay. Kelly, I think you had your hand up there. So.
Both of you were talking today about well-being, economy, and crypto. So how is that going to work?
Well, I want to share this platform with everybody else, but I'm actually involved with that right now, so I can address the well-being. Actually, I'm going to leave the well-being thing for Lindy. Is she on? I can't see her. But I will address the crypto thing. Okay. On my global strategy groups, the Lord downloaded the names of all of these people that were supposed to be heading up different aspects of that group, and they're all global experts on those particular things. In the global economic structure, the names that he gave me, in fact, all of these names are people that I've known for 20, 25 years, except for 4 of them. And 4 of them I had not met. Since that time that I established all of those, I've now met them. And one of them is a crypto expert. So on the global economic structure, we have a guy with 4 doctorates from Harvard who's a global banking expert. We have a blockchain expert. We have a crypto expert. We have a stock market exchange expert. We have an international monetary exchange expert who moves money from one economy to another and makes millions and billions of dollars just punching a computer, changing money from one economy to another. But the idea is to bring all of these people together so that they can brainstorm and ascend into the heavens together to see what is God's plan for the future, because the global economic system is going to collapse. Okay. So there has to be something to take that up. I believe in what Jonathan said, and that is that the future, and it's a temporary stopgap. It's not necessarily the forever ongoing thing, but the future of the economy is going to lie within crypto because it can't be controlled or manipulated. Okay. So I said all that to say, most economic experts will not agree with crypto. And the reason why they won't is because it's not backed up with anything. But in the global economic structure, we have now joined crypto to be backed up with gold. And when that happens, it's going to go like wildfire. And there's a whole history that goes with that, but crypto. So I opened up the Tree of Life Wellness Center, which everything in there is frequency based. But if Lindy's on, I would like for her to answer the question about the future economy being well-being. I don't see her here. Is she here?
Yeah.
Huh?
Yep, I'm here.
Oh, okay. So,
Yeah.
so can you tackle the answer about the well-being?
Yeah. Okay. So Kelly, can I just ask you to just ask the question again so I can understand what you're asking? Because I think I know what you're asking, but I want to try and answer the actual question.
Well, when capitalism and communism don't make it, we're going to have a well-being economy. So what does that look like, and how does crypto fit in the pot?
Okay. Okay. So so yesterday I was talking about I think I shared probably at least one encounter that I had where the father was starting to show me these coins that that dropped from Heraniel's wings, and when they hit the ground, they turned into a frequency, and the frequency was joy. So you think about every single economy at the moment, that economy keeps us trapped, enslaved, because we've got to work to put food on the table. We've got to work to put a roof over our head. We've got to work. And one of the things that he's been speaking to me about in restoration cities is to have a currency that is energy related. Okay, so what you put in, you get out to the economy within the city. And I'm gonna link that to crypto, because actually there's some cryptocurrencies that actually work on this basis, that they work on trading. They're trading energy. They're trading not a financial currency, but they're trading a services currency. And these are specifically African-based ones, the ones that I know about, because the inflation rate there is so ridiculous that you've got to link your currency to something that isn't so inflationary. So when you start to think about that, what happens is it starts to free up our time, because suddenly we're not going to be indebted in the same way that we're indebted within the current financial system. And what that's going to do is it's going to release a level of freedom to people. On top of all of that, what he's showing me is he's showing me how kingdom looks like community. And it's not a community that we have seen any representation of in the earth so far. So we think that community is living together. Community is union. Community is where I care as much about what's happening for you as I do about what's happening for me.
Come on.
Because when we function from a place of union, then suddenly your problems become my problems, because we are one. And he's moving us into that quantum entanglement place where I am not just me, I am us. And so from a place of I am us, suddenly there is a synergy that is going to obliterate every need, because we are going to joyfully meet each other's needs in a way that even the early church didn't understand, because there is something that he's birthing in the earth right now that has never been seen before. So if it's almost going to feel like you won the lottery, But if you won the lottery, you'd still be responsible for keeping a hold of that money. And that in itself becomes a new job. You know, we think, okay, my first job is to make the money. Great, now I've got some money. My second job is to hold on to that money. Well, actually, if we don't have to worry about money, then we can get on with the work of living. We can get on with the work of kingdom, which is going to liberate us in a whole other way. Does that make sense?
Perfect. Sounds
Awesome.
like heaven.
Awesome. Absolutely.
What about well-being?
Grace?
Sorry.
Yes, Grace.
Mike, are you taking questions out of the chat?
Should I speak?
I will, but I'll do the questions that are being put hands up first, I think. So, Grace, you had your hand up, so
Yes,
you want to
yes.
ask your
yes,
question?
Yeah, I would like to thank all of you. I truly appreciate all of you, and thank you so much for what you're carrying, what you are giving to us. My question is for you, Mike. I would like to know if human souls can be trafficked out of the earth to other dimensions. And if so, how does it happen? And if it happens, how do we engage to deliver such souls?
Okay. I'm probably not the best one to ask. I do believe, yes, it probably can happen. I know a good friend of mine is involved in a lot of that stuff. And I think Lindy is involved with Adina, I think, in looking at that stuff. I do believe it's possible. And in one engagement, which I will share tomorrow, we did engage with a place where some of that was being organized in a spiritual dynamic. To release people out of that, I would say there are basic things. One, obviously, you have to carry that in your heart. You have to have a mandate clearly, and you have to be able to engage in the dynamics of the spirit that are affecting people in that realm. Yes, it goes on in the physical realm, and obviously we want to see that change, and we want to see people set free from that. But ultimately, on earth, the best way of seeing that change is if traffickers come to know Jesus. You know, because if traffickers come to know Jesus, they won't traffic anymore. And we tend to sort of try and stop something, but actually let's look at it as a restoration process. So again, if you're in the heavens and you're looking at dimensional sort of trafficking or that type of thing, then who's behind it and how do we engage them in a restorational way? Because I would much rather see something restored and stop doing what it's doing and get restored to its original purpose, which is usually the opposite of what it's doing right now. And then we have more on our side than against us. But I'm not really, I can't say I've ever been involved in that personally, other than in the engagements we've done as a corporate thing, which I was more observing in than actually necessarily driving the whole thing. So if Lindy, if you want to answer that, or Nancy or Jonathan, feel free to do that.
I would like to just add something too about moving beings from one dimension to another dimension. I was on assignment one time in Rome, and the Lord told me, this is a very long story. I can't do it. It's just an answer to a question. But one of the assignments was I was to go to St. Peter's Cathedral and take a team of people, and I was supposed to release the sound from the door of the cathedral to the obelisk that is in the center. And the Lord said, if you'll go at 4 o'clock in the morning and make the sound one to the other, when the sun rises, I'm going to cast a shadow from that obelisk, and I want you to get on the shadow, and I'm going to take you to places that you've never been before. So this is quite a lengthy story, but basically we did that. And I sat on my knees at the door of St. Peter's and released the sound back and forth to a friend of mine who also had an intercessory prayer team sitting at the obelisk. When the sun came up, I thought it was going to fall on the door of the cathedral, but instead it fell on the statue of St. Peter. And there's a several story high statue of St. Peter holding out the keys. And when it fell on St. Peter, the Lord said, get on the shadow and follow it to the end. And when we did, the Lord said, I want you to reach up and take the keys out of Peter's hands. Now, these keys were a good 3-4 stories over my head. And I thought, Lord, how am I going to get up there to take the keys out of Peter's hands? And he said, just trust me. So I reached up like I was going to take the keys out of his hands. And when I brought my hands down, in my hands, there were 7 keys that were a foot long, and together they weighed over 40 pounds. And they actually manifested in my hand. Now I'm talking about metal keys, old skeleton keys. I still have them up in my bedroom. Anyway, he said, now I want you to take those keys and descend into hell and begin to unlock. And so I did. And that was my first experience with descending into the realm of hell. And I only did it at the command of God. I would never, ever endeavor. And I tell people, please don't think that you're just going to descend into hell and start bringing people out unless you get that assignment and mandate from the Father himself. So we descended into hell and we began to unlock. And actually we saw what happened as a result of that is still going on today, actually. We saw many, many people who were there for as many as 2,000 to 3,000 years, and they actually came out. So the issue is now they're not alive on the earth today, and you can't run over on the earth and say, oh, there's that one, or that's that one, or that's that one. But we did release them because it was time. They had been purified enough that the Lord said we could take them out. So we took them out. So it is possible for us to move people from one dimension into another dimension. And for me, all I can say is all I do is what the Lord tells me to do. And I don't understand how I can do that. How did those keys materialize in my hand? I just reached up my hand in faith. And when I came down, I had 30 pounds of keys, a foot long. How does that happen? And then the Lord said, take the keys and descend into hell and begin to unlock. And I thought, well, okay, all I can do is what he tells me to do. I still, to this day, don't have full understanding of the eternal repercussions of what we did there, but I know that it shifted and changed a whole lot of things on that day, especially in me internally, because I had no idea that it was possible for us to descend into hell and lead captivity captive until that happened. Now that's become a regular thing, and it's not even limited to humanity. It's actually limited to not even to fallen angels, but also to many heavenly beings. We can summon them from one realm into another, but we have to be very, very careful that we're only doing it because it's mandated by the Father himself. Otherwise, we can get ourselves into all kinds of trouble.
Thank you.
Do you want me to add
Okay.
anything, Mike, or is that kind of done?
If you've got something to add, yeah.
Okay, so Grace, I'm not sure if this is what you were asking, but this is where I'm prompted to go with delivering an answer. So I'm currently working with people who are still alive, but have been trafficked off-world. They have no recollection of that. And, you know, some of this stuff is going to sound like science fiction. And I don't even like science fiction. I don't watch science fiction because it's never interested me. So when the Lord started to open up this realm for me and started to show me in encounters that this is where I was going to be going, I was completely freaked out. And then he just delivered somebody on my doorstep, really, where it just opened up and I started to go with it. So I don't know if you've come across the technology that is medbeds, but there is technology that exists that means that in a very, very short period of time, everything can be erased from your memory. And because it happens off world, it's in a different realm. And so people can be trafficked for years and yet come back and wake up the next morning in their bed as though nothing has happened, and then have to live with the trauma of what that looks like, with no memory of any of that. And there are trapped parts of them off-world that need to be repatriated. So I actually don't want to go too deeply into that. I just feel like it's something that the Father wants to put out there as this is some of the stuff that is being exposed in the earth right now. He is raising up people who know how to deal with this, how to work with people to bring complete restoration around all of that stuff. And what is very exciting is that in every instance where I'm working with these people, it is linked with the restoration of beings around that stuff. So yeah, I'm just going to stop there.
Okay, awesome. There's a question for Jonathan in the chat, if you want to have a look, Jonathan. Just be a little bit sensitive about how you answer it. It's one of those sort of ones that people are sensitive over, but feel free to have a go at it.
Is it in the chat or is it in one new message?
Yes, in the chat.
Okay. My personal view is that it was a psyop and it was not real.
Okay. So the actual question is about the QAnon movement.
Oh, so, I read the question. Yeah, I would love to know, Jonathan. I'm so sorry, guys. I would love to know Jonathan's take on what happened with the QAnon movement. Were a lot of people just hoodwinked, or is there really an undercover infiltration working on behalf of exposing pedophilia rings and whatnot? All I can share is my gut feeling, my sense, my discernment. And my feeling is that a lot of people were kept hanging because there was always something about to happen, always something about to happen, always something about to happen. And a lot of stuff actually didn't happen in terms of the cold light of day. I think it was a big distraction. That's my personal view. Now, I'm not saying I'm right. That's just where I have a settled spirit. Now, that doesn't mean that there isn't a lot of satanic pedophilia going on. I think there absolutely is, but the people involved with, who are involved with it want us distracted by giving us all kinds of stories and also coming up with some crazy scenarios, which is, to take us down a rabbit hole. So that's personally my view. Now, take it for what you.
Okay. I mean, I concur with that. I mean, there was so much going on around the election and all of that time, which a lot of people got drawn into that, and obviously the prophetic movement in the US particularly were very much supporting that whole agenda.
Yeah.
Personally, when I engaged the Father with it and asked him about it, I had no resonance at all that it was true. But it's one of those things, as Jonathan says, it clouds a lot of truth. It actually hides truth when it's seeking to expose truth, because it puts around it a whole lot of conspiracy, which then people, oh, that's rubbish, or those people buy into it and actually don't see the real truth because they're buying into a system of belief which really isn't true. And I know friends of mine who are totally into it, but when I engaged it, I just wondered what frequency is on this, and what frequency is it what fruit is it producing in people? And all I saw it produce was more and more antagonism, competition, conflict, tribalism, separation, division. I mean, it just was not bringing peace anywhere. Now, I agree, there is a lot of stuff that's hidden, which does happen, and satanic ritual abuse, all that stuff, I totally accept. But I wouldn't say that you can put that on a political party or anything else, because that then is what causes the problems. You're then putting it onto a political agenda rather than looking at the spiritual dynamic about helping people to become free from the effects of abuse and control and all of those things which do go on in the earth. And by making it political, I think you minimize the effect of what's going on and diminish what you can do, because you're caught up in a political argument and a whole lot of political nonsense that actually, if you focused on what the real issue was and sought God for the mandates for really dealing with the real issues, you wouldn't get sidetracked by the confusion and the smoke and mirrors. So I personally believe that as well in terms of Jonathan.
I give a little example of another thing which came up as a distraction and a diversion. Many of you will know in the late 80s, early 90s, when people started getting into revelation prayer ministry, and people were getting memories of abuse, and often it was ritual abuse, sometimes by family members. There was an organization that started up called the Forced Memory Syndrome Association, the Association for Forced Memory Syndrome. And they basically said that these pastors and these people in churches are planting forced memories in people, and it's all forced and it's wrong, and we've got lots of PhDs after our names, and don't touch it with a barge pole. However, if you looked at the founders of that organization, two of them were convicted pedophiles, and they worked a couple of them worked in the CIA, where they were doing mind control experiments, and they were actually protecting those who were involved. And that's another example. But as soon as you look at their website, I don't know if it's up there now anyway, it's a forced memory syndrome. It all looks pretty kosher, but you get this feeling underneath. It's like it doesn't sit right. And then you start researching the individuals. So that's another example.
Okay, awesome. All right, any other questions?
I think the only way to discern about QAnon is to just go and ask the Father. The thing of it is there, half of the stuff that you read on the internet today is pure lie based anyway. So the best thing to do is just go and ask the Father, what do you think about it? And he'll give you instructions. I had hundreds and hundreds of emails about all of that thing going on with QAnon. And there's another one now, Nasara Gassara. And I've had people calling me saying, you're not going to have to sell your house because they're going to pay off your mortgage, and they're going to have trillions of dollars to pay off everybody's mortgages. And I go, really? So I did a little bit of research on it, and I went to the Father and I said, okay, Father, what's this all about? And when he shows me what it is all about, it's nothing at all like what it sounds like on the internet. So, one of the reasons why the internet is going to be deplatformed, actually right now, they're deplatforming whoever they want to deplatform. So if your attitude or the stuff you put out is not in concert with their personal beliefs, that's what happened to Trump. They deplatformed Back Porch. They deplatformed, took him off of Twitter, so he couldn't even, have any contact with anybody. It's all controlled and it's all manipulated, which is one reason why we're building something called the digital ark. But my answer to every one of those questions is, Lord, would you just show me what's your desire? What is your thought about all of this? Because Jesus is the answer to every question we can ask. And it all we have to do is ask him. And he loves it when we give questions. The Father loves having those times when we can interchange and ask him questions. He delights in that. So why do we want to go to the internet and try and figure out if QAnon is real or not? Actually, in the end result, it doesn't matter, because I love what Jonathan says repeatedly. The good news is we win. And no matter what they build and no matter what they do, we have the power to deconstruct it and reconstruct it to be the reflection of the kingdom. So yeah, I would like to answer one question that I saw that was for me, which is from Lee. And it says, a question for Nancy: what do you think of incarnation? That's a very interesting question. But one statement that the Lord gave me when I was asking him about incarnation, he said, a true human being is incarnated by the kingdom. So we become the incarnation of the kingdom. And to me, that's the best way to speak about incarnation, is that we become the kingdom incarnate. That's what we're moving to, and that's what we're in a state of preparation for.
I would just not add to that, but the previous question, just to touch on it. When people are deeply moved by a particular issue and they really feel that they have a mandate for that issue, that makes them vulnerable to people who prey on their compassion and their heart to deceive them. And this happened over financial issues. There were people who were investing in bank debenture schemes and they were trapped into giving money because they spoke about it in kingdom terms. This will be the great wealth transfer. And they hook you in because they catch something in you which stirs you, and it opens you up to believe in things which are not true. And it is a deception, and people prey on people's compassion. And so lots of people have a real desire for people who are being trafficked. And it's a genuine desire that I believe that God is put on their hearts, and they're motivated by helping that. And then when they hear all this sort of Q stuff around this secret stuff and this underground stuff and whatever, it sort of connects to what their passion is, but then they end up getting drawn hook, line, and sinker into the deception that surrounded it, and often lose the sense of what they're doing. And I think it is a very clear agenda to draw people away from the very thing they're really passionate about and get them hooked into the conspiracies that are all around it. And I think be really careful when something appears to be connecting to you and something you're passionate about, whether it be abortion or whether it be other things. And I know a lot of Christians are passionate about things, but when it starts to get politicized, be very careful that you're not being drawn into a political spirit issue. And when the political spirit and the religious spirit starts to come together, it is a very powerful thing. And that is why the whole thing of, Christian Zionism and all that stuff that Jonathan's been talking about, it hooks into something and you get drawn into the political spirit agenda. And it is very often very divisive. And you'll find it never brings peace anywhere. It always stirs up conflict and divides. And how many Christians were divided over issues which really they shouldn't have been divided over, but became party political and in a sense partisan rather than kingdom. And as soon as you get drawn into partisan issues, you miss the kingdom altogether, because God is not partisan. He's not for any political party or any ideology or any ism or any other thing. He's for kingdom. And as soon as we start putting our trust in the systems of the world to answer our problems rather than Jesus, we're buying into the tree of the knowledge of good and evil humanism system and not the kingdom. I am not putting my trust in any political system to answer the problems of this world. I'm not saying that political systems can't be helpful. I'd love to have a peaceful political system that means I can live in a politically state of freedom and all of that. But bottom line is the kingdom is the answer. No man-made system will solve the world's problems. You cannot solve the world's problems with the same thing that created the problems in the first place. And so let's find a heavenly solution, not an earthly one. I'm not saying it isn't practical and we don't outwork it, but it comes out of heaven and it doesn't come out of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil.
That is a very massive problem in the body of Christ at the present moment, because I get 1,000 emails every day, and I want to say 600 of them have to do with the political situation. And when you, the kingdom has nothing to do with the political machine. And in fact, it's so far from that. It's like, once we, and if you take your religious beliefs and your conservative beliefs and try and attach them to a political system, it becomes a great passion. And I mean, people are really, really passionate about it. And I think to myself, Lord, can we just reveal the fact that the kingdom is totally non-political? And in fact, I'm gonna make a statement here that's gonna ruffle some feathers. But when the kingdom actually does come, there's no such thing anymore as the United States, Iran, Israel, South Africa. There's one nation under God, and He is the head of everything that we do. So nations are going to cease to exist. We're not going to be identified anymore by our nation, our culture, our sex, our economic status. Our only identity is going to be Him. And therefore, all of those things fade into complete insignificance. And it's not that God isn't raising up people to support certain political, everybody has to do what they feel like their piece is. But sometimes I get so disturbed because it seems like so much of the body of Christ is so politically oriented that they tap into all of that as if the life of the United States is dependent on this political party. And I said, it's not. Israel is not dependent on any political party. Iran is not dependent upon it. We're all codependent on Him. So once we can tap into that reality, the rest of it is really insignificant. And every conspiracy theory that's out there, it doesn't make any difference if they're accurate or not accurate. The truth is, in the end, we win. So the very platform that evil is building, in the same way as Haman built a gallows on which to hang Mordecai, and he himself hung on it, the thing that they're building is actually going to be turned around to restore them and bring them back to the Father. So anyway, I don't want to preach. I just want to say that the political thing inside of Christianity is a big issue, and trying to dismantle all of that is
Okay, Mikhail, you've got your hand up there. I think you've had it up for a while, so thank you for your patience.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
I keep on having these dreams and visions about Elijah and the spirit of Elijah and the mantle of Elijah. And I heard that many believe that his spirit will come the third time to restore all things. And I was just wondering how do you see that?
Ooh, okay. Obviously in the New Testament, well, it does talk about the spirit of Elijah and restoration. But it was obviously in that thing talking about the restoration of what God was doing with Israel and what that would lead into. Now, I don't personally see the spirit of Elijah coming in the same way in the future, because I think we are the manifestation of those who are preparing the way for the kingdom to be established. So we can operate in the spirit of Elijah in inverted commas because we're operating in a preparing way. We want Jesus to come through us. We want the kingdom to flow into the earth through us. In that sense, it's like preparing for something, but I don't see it as a fulfillment of prophecy. In fact, obviously, I don't believe any prophecy has been unfulfilled. It's all fulfilled in Christ, and we're in it. We're in the time of fulfillment, rather than I'm looking for another event or another thing or another thing. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't seasons and there aren't times that God does certain things. And we've had revivals in the past. We've had amazing things, awakenings that God has used to awaken us to reality. You know, back in the Toronto days and the Toronto blessing and all that stuff, you know, it was a wake up, you know, wow, God, look at all this stuff. You're not like I thought you were, you know, and I think he does things like that all the time to, in a sense, shake us out of our complacency and give us a bit of a boot up the backside to sort of like, hey, there's something more in all this. But personally, I don't really see it as the spirit of Elijah as what the Bible says. But of course, God can do anything he wants, anytime he wants. And therefore, I think the principle of it can be outworked through us, but not actually the specific prophecy or that way. And I think a lot of that stuff is tied to the way prophetic people and the prophetic movement is always looking to a very future perspective. It's always put off to the future. It's coming, and it never comes. You know, and that's part of the problem. People get prophecy fatigue. They get disappointed and disillusioned because they've heard this prophecy and this prophecy and this prophecy, and it's just like, well, where is it? And then there'll always be a reason why it's not yet, because it's holding you in anticipation and you're not living in the present. Anything that puts off to the future, which is our inheritance in the present, which is the fullness of God's kingdom, is robbing you of what you presently can actually experience and enter into. So I sort of would really not really look at it in those terms. And I believe that the whole prophetic movement and how they do things is old. It's very mediatorial, and it's very much telling people what God is saying rather than helping people to hear what God is saying for themselves. You know, the prophets need to do themselves out of a job by actually helping everyone to hear God.
Come on, that's it.
Jesus said, all my sheep can hear my voice, you know? So I think sort of we need a fresh view of how God speaks to us. And I'm not saying in the time that God hasn't spoken to us to actually awaken people to the fact that God can speak, but it often then becomes a mediatorial office that replaces God for people and becomes a mediator. You go for the prophetic conference to hear God. Why do I need to go to a prophetic conference to hear God when I can just talk to him? And he's there all the time wanting me to. The problem is I'm not able to listen very well, or I've not learned to tune in very well. He's always speaking. So some of those things might have been helpful for a season, but they then become denominationalized. They denominated into we're the prophetic movement, and then that became fossilized, and they've never moved on, unfortunately, in that way. I don't know if anyone wants to add anything to that.
I would like to give a word about that. Since we're talking about the prophetic. In the year 2000, the Lord told me to stop prophesying by the gift of prophecy. And it freaked me out because I was known for the prophetic gift that I operated in. And I said, Lord, what do you mean stop prophesying by the gift? And he goes, in America, we're raising up an entire generation of prophetic junkies. And they move from one prophet to the next prophet to the next prophet. They take all of their words and they write them all down, and half of them have books this thick with all of their prophetic words in them, but they have yet to fulfill one of them. And so he said, stop prophesying by the gift, because the fivefold is at this present moment is actually passing away. And it has a timetable, which an earthly timetable in which it is functioning. And I think a clear demonstration, because the word says that the fivefold is not to do the work of the ministry. The fivefold is for the purpose of equipping and perfecting the saints for the work of the ministry. So my job, and I love, because this just ratifies what Mike said, my job was work myself out of a job. Because if I can bring people into the heavenly realms and they can have face-to-face encounters with Jesus themselves, they no longer have need of me. and that delights my heart. So the issue is there is a timetable attached to that, because the word says they were given to perfect and equip the saints for the work of the ministry, so that instead of having one prophetic per person, you have 10,000 prophetic people to stand up and take their place. And when I say prophetic people, I'm not just talking about words of prophecy. I'm talking about people that operate in every revelational gift. But the very next statement is the fivefold is here until, meaning there is an earthly timetable for that to come to an end, until we grow up into the fullness of the measure of the stature of Christ Jesus, at which time the Father commends to us the fullness of our inheritance. So I think that what happened, let's just talk about what happened around the political arena. If you notice, almost all of the prophetic words that came out did not come to pass the way that they were spoken. And the reason for that is all of that is beginning to pass away. Now, I have people calling me all the time saying, well, Trump's still going to come into the presidency and blah, 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 because they're so caught up in this political move and the word of the prophets, because the word of the prophets has to come to pass. But the issue is, why do they need the fivefold ministry if we're growing up into the fullness of the measure of the stature of Christ, if we're leaving behind and putting behind childish things? So when I told the Lord, when he said in 2000, give up prophesying, I thought, Lord, if I give up prophesying, nobody's going to come to my conferences, because the only reason they come is because they know I'm going to stay up until 5 o'clock in the morning and prophesy over every single person in their church until they all go home edified, encouraged, and built up. And he said, there is a greater level that I'm taking you to, which is called the spirit of prophecy, which doesn't operate by permissive will, but only by sovereign will. So many of the things that he's given me in terms of spirit of prophecy, wow, you talk about governmental impact, they shift and change everything in sight. And it isn't because I'm hugely anointed, it's just because I did what the Lord said do, stop prophesying by the gift. That was all the way back in 2000, 21 years ago. So I think that we're seeing the evidence now of that passing away. And that's why in the most recent one, I mean, everybody and their brother had a prophetic word about how Trump was going to come back into office and all of that kind of thing. But yeah, anyway.
Okay. I mean, God said the same thing to me. Stop prophesying like that. I mean, I would do the same thing. Prophesy over everybody. Just wait forever. However long it took, I would do it. And yeah, because the Spirit would come on me and I would be able to do it. But it was becoming mediatorial. People were looking for me to speak what God was saying to them rather than hearing God for themselves. And it was self-defeating if I'm telling people to engage God and they're engaging God through what I'm saying, rather than engaging God themselves. So, and I know probably most of us have come to that point where we realize it's not about the one person who's doing it, it's about all of us being able to do it. And I think that's really, really important to say. There's a question here from Tasha for all of us, and I think you're going to get 4 probably very different answers here, which is good because they're all our personal experience. This question is for all 4. How does your spouse deal with the mandate that God has for your life and ministry? If your spouse does not fully understand, how can they make sure that they're being a help and not a hindrance? Who would like to go with that?
I want to start that answer because I had the best spouse ever. And he wasn't even a hyper spiritual person. And actually, the Lord put us together to make a proper balance, because he's extremely administrative and very, very black and white. So you have to be able to prove everything. in order for it to pass his inspection. And me, I'm the total opposite. I fly by the seat of my pants. And half of the time, he has to pull me back down and bring me back into reality, so that I can take a few minutes to think about what it is that I'm doing. We were married for 50 years. He wasn't even saved when I gave my life to the Lord, and it was 7 years before he came into the things of God. And that came only because of love and because of the depth of my love, because I didn't confront him with the fact that he wasn't spiritually heading our family. But he was a very good provider. He loved the word of God. And after he gave his life to Jesus, he was very, very deep, but very non-expressive. So the two of us made a perfect balance. And, I give continual praise to God for him, because for him, not even, especially when he didn't even know the Lord, to allow me the freedom, because I flew all over the world with very charismatic, very handsome, extremely wealthy people in all of their private jets. And never once did he waver, because he knew that he was the only man for me. In 35 years of ministry, I went to over 130 nations, and many of them were very violent nations. So he would release me to go there, knowing that I was under the protection of God and that I was protected by the frequency of love. But in 35 years, he only said no twice. And one of those was, I wanted to go to Afghanistan the week after 9/11, and he put his foot down and said, "You're not going. I don't care what you say. No, the answer is no, you're not going." And one other time was when I wanted to do a special thing for the Global Peace Initiative in Iran. And he put his foot down because he had seen a televised video of them actually taking children out of school, laying them down on the concrete and shooting their brains out. And he had seen that the day before I told him, I want to go to Iran. And he said, "No, you're not going, period. That's it." So it's very difficult when you have these mandates on your life. And I am so thankful, so thankful that I had a husband who was able to release me. And the reason why he would release me, he didn't understand the thing I was doing. I mean, literally, he didn't understand it, but he saw the fruit. And he would get these calls from presidents of nations and people all over the world thanking him for letting me come. And because of that, he gave me a lot of freedom to be able to do, even though he didn't have, I mean, if I talked to him about having a visitation from Pleiadia and walking on the ancient pathways, he would just look at me like, "What are you talking about?" Because he didn't have a clue, but he saw the fruit and he honored the fruit. We were married for 50 years and he died a year ago in February. He didn't die. He actually was just graduated into another place. And at his funeral, I just totally rejoiced. And the reason for that was after the ceremonies and everything were over, I took all of my children, all of my grandchildren, all of my great-grandchildren, and we totally swamped this entire favorite restaurant where we are. And I had just ordered my meal, and all of a sudden the heavens opened up and the great cloud of witnesses showed up, and Abraham stepped out of the great cloud of witnesses. And he said, "I just came to tell you that, number one, your husband completed everything that was written on his scroll. Number two, his legacy is firmly affixed in the heavenly realms, and it's going to last for all eternity. And number three, he's finally seen his footprints in every nation where you went, because he's now seeing the unfolding of everything that was accomplished." So I'm sitting at the table. I've just ordered my food. And on my left-hand side, I have my unbelieving brother-in-law. On my right-hand side, I have my nominal Baptist brother. And I'm having a literal conversation with Abraham in the restaurant. And I'm looking up and I'm saying, thank you very, very much for coming. And thank you. I appreciate so much that you're telling me all this. And the two of them are looking at me like she has gone off the deep end because I'm having a conversation with invisible beings in the ceiling of the restaurant. That night when we came home, my brother-in-law sat there and he was watching me so curiously. And he said, would you care to enlighten me about what was happening in the restaurant? And my first inclination was, I can't possibly tell him what happened. But the Lord said, yeah, tell him. And so I told him, and he broke into profuse weeping and on the spot gave his life to Jesus Christ. So I give full credit for everything I've done to my husband, because without him, I could never have done the things that I've done in the earth. So anyway,
Awesome.
I didn't mean to take up so much time, but that's a good question
Okay.
for me.
Anyone else want to answer that one? Jonathan, Lindy?
Go for it, Lindy. I'll follow you. Ladies first.
Okay, so I want to honor my husband. I think it can't be easy to be married to me. He is not on my page, even vaguely. He doesn't understand the supernatural realm. Yet he completely releases me to function in whatever it is that the Father is asking me to do. And there have been some challenging things. The Father asked me if I'd move to California. This is a few years ago. And of course I said yes, because I know that actually, if the Father's asking me to move to California and I say yes, the Father is going to deal with my husband. That was a tricky time for us. But I don't know what's happening with that. The Father has not closed the door on that. And I sit in that place of thinking, well, I did what the Father asked me to do. One of the things in the question says, how can you make sure they are being a help and not a hindrance? Okay, so let me just tell you one thing that is going to liberate you. Nobody can get in the way of your destiny but you. Nobody. And the way that we get in the way of our destiny is because we don't have a heart of love, or we don't walk like the Father through situations. And then we want to point fingers and go, my husband is not allowing me, or whatever. I am completely submitted to him in that marriage relationship, and we see that submission one to another. So we dialogue around things, and I know that if the Father's asking me to do something, and my husband is not on that page, it's actually not my responsibility to deal with him. My responsibility is to honor him and love him, and leave it up to the Father to change his heart. And if he doesn't, the Father had my yes in any case. So it's a win-win. So I just want to say to anybody out there who feels like my spouse doesn't understand me, therefore I can't pursue the purposes of God. That's a complete nonsense. You absolutely can pursue the purposes of God if we keep ourselves right. And then from that place, nothing can stop us.
That's fabulous counsel, Lindy. Thank you so much.
Okay, Jonathan.
Okay. Well, my beautiful wife is the best thing that ever happened to me, and I know that God put us together. However, as I've alluded to, over the last couple of days. The first 17 years were quite difficult because we were not healed and whole. She came from a very conservative fundamentalist background that thought speaking in tongues was demonic. And I agreed that I would not speak in tongues to preserve our relationship. And then I was reading a Smith Wigglesworth book, and it just started welling up outside of me and splurting out, and she could see the authenticity in it. So she adjusted. So that was good. When I started having spiritual assignments and going on spiritual missions, which were kind of out of this world, she didn't have a grid for it because we weren't at that point spiritually on the same page. And unfortunately, I kind of got hammered when I got home through demonic parts of her that weren't yet healed. But because of my healing and her healing over a period of time, we are now 100% on the same page. I think when we were married, we were two rough diamonds. We've gone through the polishing, which is rubbing alongside with Jesus. And 29 years on, it's the best relationship I've ever had, and it gets better every day. We complement each other. She's the front-facing person on the health business. I do the systems and help with the strategy. On the Light Busters, she's more relational than I am. I build out the material and do we just work so well together. And now we know each other so well that we give each other latitude and we kind of rein each other in a little bit. She tried to rein me in today about saying a few things that I said. And it was those things that I said that she said I shouldn't say that got me into trouble. So but, she doesn't like the idea that I've volunteered to be a martyr. That piece she doesn't like. But other than that, we're on the same page and it's beautiful and wonderful. So my encouragement is get yourself healed and whole, and you will experience alignment and get on the same page like never before. That's been my experience. That's all I have to offer.
Okay. Yeah, it's quite a difficult one, I think, when you're looking at everyone's different. And I think honoring and respecting each other for the differences that you are and not trying to conform each other to the way you feel you should be is a key. And sometimes you get a sort of an imbalance in a partnership, that one is more spiritual or has a spiritual mandate and the other one is, well, I'm looking after the children, or this is, and that's fine, because actually we do have different callings, and sometimes they complement and they are in the same area, and sometimes they're widely different areas. And I think honor and respecting the difference and not trying to change. And redemptive gift is also important, to understand that we're different redemptively. And therefore, for me, I'm prophet, teacher, redemptive. Therefore, I'm always trying to see what the issue is and fix it. She's mercy gift redemptive, and therefore she's always empathetic with people. And well, you just want to fix everything. Well, of course I do. That's how I'm wired. So I'm wired to understand and try and fix it. You're wired to be, compassionate to people and demonstrate. So yeah, we're watching something on the TV, and I'm like, oh, why did that happen? What's behind that? What political things behind that? What spirit? She's like, well, can we send them a check? It's just like, now, accepting that and accepting differences is really, really important. But, to be honest, if there is brokenness and if there is areas that are still wounded or still there's insecurity, if one partner has a relationship with God, which is way, way beyond where the other partner seems to be, and that partner is insecure, that can create major issues in relationship, because they will possibly become jealous of your relationship with God, and that can create tension. And so, I remember in our relationship, which has been very difficult over the years and up and down and all sorts of different things, that when I first started to engage heaven, And I really got intense about it because it was a really intense experience, and I was sharing my experience intensely, and I was trying to help people to engage. And I shared like my daily routine with God at that moment. This is back in 2011 or something, you know, and I just said, look, all close your eyes, and I'm just going to engage with God the way I would do as if you weren't here. And so I did that. And everyone was like, wow, how do you do? That's just, you know, but my wife was really quite quiet. And so then we were going home in the car, and she turned to me and said, well, you don't really need me, do you? And so I looked at her and says, well, in reality, God meets all the needs I have spiritually, but you're my wife. So I want a relationship with you, which is designed for a wife. My relationship with God is my relationship with God, and your relationship with God is your relationship with God. And we've got to respect that those relationships should bring both of us into a better relationship with one another. But sometimes it's difficult. And where people are at different stages, it's not easy. You know, marriage is not easy at all. You know, I've got to be totally honest. Marriage is not easy at all. But if you mutually respect and honor each other in what you think your callings are and the things that you're called to do, and just give each other the space, then I think, you know, that's how things work out. So when you're saying, you know, in your question, well, how can I make sure that I'm not a hindrance? Well, don't be a hindrance. You know, and if you're feeling like you want to be a hindrance, then that's an issue internally that needs dealing with. So if I was to look at my wife and see what she's doing and get jealous for what she's doing and then try and hinder her, then I need to deal with why I would be feeling that way. And it works both sides in that sense. So, you know, I would say that most people have very different callings. And if you have a very similar calling, then that's wonderful. But most relationships don't, because we're very different people. And therefore respect and honor that, and look to support and encourage each other in being the best that you can be. You know, be the best husband, be the best wife, and allow God to be God within your relationship. You know, because primarily I must put God first. I must seek first the kingdom above everything else, and then trust that he will do the rest. You know, like Lindy said, it's like, you know, I remember we had a conversation years ago where Lindy said, you know, I'm not saying what she said, but it was almost like, there's a difficult situation that I'm going through right now. I'm going to put God first. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. You need to put God first. That's just, I think, primary. And then you have to trust in God. And ultimately, if it doesn't work out the way you want it to work out, then God, I said yes. You know, as Lindy said, I said yes. It's like, this is your responsibility then, or show me what I need to do, you know, in this situation. And I think, you know, I understand the sentiment behind the question, and I feel that question would be in a lot of relationships, that seemingly one person is in the heavens and the other one's sort of looking after the kids, or, you know, whatever it might be. So, you know, honor and respect and love's unconditional. Otherwise it isn't love. And if I can't be loved for who I am, then I'm not loved. You know, and if I can't love for who my wife is, then I'm not loving. So there is a sense of that, which is, you know, these things are quite real, and not always does it go the way you would really like it to go all the time. You know, there are ups and downs and difficulties within every relationship, which can always be worked through if both parties want to work it through. And it's really difficult when one party doesn't. That obviously becomes when things get very, very sticky, when one partner doesn't want to work it through and the other one does, you know. And, you know, there have been times that I've seen that with people and tried to help them, you know, and found it really difficult when one party doesn't want to engage, you know. And it's so difficult when people get in that state. Now, it's wonderful if that's never happened to anybody and you've never had that. If you have, and you've gone through divorce or any of those things, or separation, you know, in the past there's been a huge stigma on that, which has made people feel hugely guilty and given up on their destiny because they feel unworthy, and the church has made them feel so. And we really need to unpack and undo all that and really free people who've gone through painful separations and difficult times, making sure that you do not feel guilty, ashamed, and condemned, and therefore feel you're unworthy to do the amazing things that God's got for you to do. And in the past, divorce has been a huge issue, excommunicating people because of divorce, marginalize people because of divorce. And in reality, we've got to have grace and mercy. Grace is triumphant, His grace is limitless, His mercy is triumphant. And even if we do go through difficult times, let's be gracious to one another in those difficult periods, because, you know, it's like, I know people who've gone through that, and it's really derailed them in a way which, yes, of course, it's painful, it hurts, it's really difficult, but your destiny is still your destiny, whether you're married or divorced or separated, you know. And be careful that the enemy does not condemn you and then sideline you, or, you know, get you off track if there are difficulties in relationship, whatever the relationship. The same with children. I look at my children and I love them all. They're all very different. But if I could go back and know what I know now and be the dad that I would be now to them then, I would love to do that. But I can't. But I can, in the spirit, look to unpick and deal with some of the consequences of me sacrificing them on the altar of church. Because I did. You know, I sacrificed my family to a degree on the altar of church because I worked for the church. And there was this sense where I had to give my worth to the church, and therefore I prioritized that above family and children at times, you know. And, you know, I would love to have not done that, but I have. And I've had to deal with that with my children and apologize to them and honestly share with them, you know, what was going on and be real about it with them. And, you know, by and large, I've got a pretty good relationship with all of them now, but it's not perfect. And I'm not responsible for their forgiving me. I can only ask. If they choose to live in bitterness or unforgiveness or whatever, I can't make them forgive me. I can obviously do everything to show that I love them and I love them unconditionally. And even if they haven't forgiven me, I'm still going to love them. But I can't make anyone be one to be reconciled. I can't make anybody. Now, you know, relationships, close relationships have the capacity to really hurt. You know, no one could hurt me that I don't know. You know, they can say whatever they like, and they do, you know, online or whatever. And it's like, bless them, God bless them, I forgive them, whatever. But obviously, if someone close to you hurts you, it can wound you because you've opened your heart to those people, and rightly so, because that's what we should be, open-hearted. So you've got to be real and deal with those things and be honest about them. And, you know, don't try and pretend. You know, I don't need to pretend that I'm the perfect wife, husband, or the perfect father. I'm not. You know, and actually, I'm wired in a particular way, which makes it quite difficult socially. You know, I mean, I'm sure I'm on the autistic scale somewhere, but I think God has used that to focus me and enable me to do stuff. And I've asked Him, can you change me in certain areas to make it easier for me in social situations? And He's like, no, I wired you that way. You just need to learn to be the best you can. But, you know, there are situations I get into, and I get into overload where I can't emotionally cope with shallowness that goes on in conversations and stuff. And it's just like, oh, I've had enough. I just can't cope with it, you know. And my family know when I get to a point where it's just like I'm on overload, you know. And I've had to learn sometimes just to withdraw in those situations. Now they're aware of that because, you know, I've talked to them and told them, look, when this stuff goes on, I struggle, you know, I struggle with how to deal with these type of social settings. Now I can sit down with a group of people and talk about kingdom things forever. You know, I've done Q&A sessions that have lasted 8 hours. It's like no problem whatsoever. When it comes to social settings, which are really shallow, I just struggle with that, you know. Now you got to be real. You know, I'm just being real with you. in some situations, I find it quite difficult to deal with those type of things. And that's caused issues in family in the past when I didn't recognize what I was feeling, and they just thought I was being rude, you know. And so when you come to an understanding and you accept, and then you honor the differences you have, and I'm not saying I couldn't change in certain areas or be better, I obviously could, but I think, you know, I want to be real. And I think for all of our relationships, it's where the rubber hits the road, you know, and it's real, and it needs to be outworked, you know, the most loving way that you can possibly outwork it, really. That's, you know, all I could say. What else have we got here?
We have
Okay, there's one for
hands up.
Lindy.
Mark, there's 3 hands up. Can you see the 3 hands up?
Okay, let's have the hands. Okay, we'll go. Okay, the ones I've seen, I can see who put their hands up first. We'll go for Lilia and Philip, and then John, and then we'll go for Leah. There's the order I've got on the participants. So Lilia and Philip, if you've got a question.
Hi, Mike. Philip this time. My question's for you. You mentioned legislating over the pandemic-related fear and the race politics, that's what I'll call it, related anger. Could you briefly talk through what a legislative session like that would look like?
Okay. Depends whether it was corporate or whether it was individual. When it's corporate, you may have differences of opinion within a corporate group on the nitty-gritty of it all. So you've got to come to what is the Father asking us to do here, not what would I like to do. So it's always, let's seek the Father's heart, and then let's do what the Father's showing us, rather than I want to do this because I see this problem and I can fix it. And I think that is really important that you embrace that within a group, that no one is driving the group with their agenda, but you want the Father's agenda. And then you do whatever he shows you to do. That could be making declarations or decrees, sending angels. What we did here, when I saw all this stuff about, you know, the fear and what was going on and how that was destabilizing the world and just making it all worse, I sought the Father, and we decided to release a frequency of love. And because we've got groups of people all over the world, we asked them to start in New Zealand in their 12 o'clock midday. And then every time zone that we had connection, we would all do it 12 o'clock each day. So literally it would go around the world. And we would release a wave of love and the frequency of love. And we would impart that love into the fear to cast out the fear and bring calm. And to dial it all down so that there was a sense where it was under control, if you like, rather than it was just getting wildly spread further and further and further. And so that was what we did. And there are lots of things you could do, but it's all, for me, legislation is about outworking an authority that God gives you. It's not about just coming up with the things you would like to do. When it comes to the racial issues and all of that, there are deep underlying divides spiritually behind all that. And within every nation, there is a work of division going on to divide and cause competition and conflict and tribalism, and then more conflict because now people are on two sides and they're fighting each other. All of that stuff. There's such a deep thing within every nation where that's there. It isn't just the US, it's everywhere, you know. And when we got to be careful that a genuine protest movement that says this is not what we are signed up for, this is not the country we want to live in, does not get politicized and then creates more conflict, because it then creates a political agenda, not we want to sort this out and we want peace and we want reconciliation. You don't see much reconciliation as soon as it becomes political. It really starts to create more tension and more conflict. And therefore, you've got to look to, okay, God, what is your solution to this? And some of it is, it's a deeper agenda than just what we see on the surface. And so when we started to do this, that's when we started to engage with 4 orders of fallen angels who were responsible for creating this sort of thing around the world, and they were division, competition, warmonger, and tribalism. And then we engaged them to see them restored to their original position, which was union, covenant, peacemaking, maker, and family. And so we looked to come in the opposite spirit and looked to turn those who were functioning in that divisive way, causing strife and enmity and all of that, and look to restore them. So we had to treat them with love and forgiveness. And so blessing. And so forgiveness, again, it's been talked about a lot, is the key. For me, whenever you're dealing with any sort of conflict, any anger, forgiveness needs to be released. And sometimes you have to do that on behalf of those who aren't doing it. If you have a mandate to take identification of a particular area or group or whatever it might be, and then begin to outwork it in that way. But generally, it's like, what is it that you're saying, Father? What is it you want us to do? And don't step outside of that mandate. It's like, just because there is a problem, that does not mean that you have the right to fix it or try to fix it. You know, I see all sorts of problems that I would love to fix, and I go to the Father and he says, no, that's not your responsibility. Don't get involved. And I'm like, yeah, but I could, you know, and it's like, it's not your responsibility. So I've had to honor what he's doing through me, and me not making sure that I'm not going to jump into something with my, you know, 2 big feet and get in the way of something or interfere with something, or actually sometimes get in the way of what he's doing, thinking I'm helping, you know. So it's being very careful in those situations. And, you know, it's not easy, because these are global issues, you know. Yes, they're outworked in our nations, you know, and we had such division when we had Brexit and we had you know, and all of that, and the whole, you felt it in the nation. You felt what was behind it, you know, and the divisiveness about it. And that's, forget the rights or wrongs or whatever you believe about the political thing, whatever way you want to vote. Actually, to me, democracy in essence creates division. Because if you have primarily 2 or 3 parties, you are going to divide a nation up by the way they vote. And if, whenever I vote the way God wants me to vote, and I ask him what he wants me to do, if whatever happens, I am going to honor those who win the vote, because I am not going to slag them off, try and undermine them, whatever. I am going to support them and honor them, because I feel that that is the way we can bring about integration and wholeness. So no matter what you think about what governments have done during this pandemic and whatever else, you know, I would not want to have been in government, in any government, during this situation, personally, because it's like a nightmare for any government to try and resolve these things that are going on. And all governments have messed it up, and all governments have done things which they've done their best in situations. So honoring them, I think, is the right way to go about it. But again, do what the Father shows you to do, or not do, really. I don't know if anyone wants to throw anything else into that.
That's great, Mike. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Okay. John. Have you got a question you want to ask, John?
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's early in the morning, so
Okay.
I'm in my PJs.
Okay, yeah, you're in Australia, so are you moved up to the Gold Coast yet?
Yeah, we have. We made it to the promised land.
Oh, well done. Well done.
Yeah, no, it's really good. I lived here for 20 years, so it's like I'm just reconnecting with a lot of family and friends. So I'm loving it. But yeah, first of all, I just actually wanted to say thank you, because I think it's been about 8 years I've been, you know, listening and learning and going on this journey. So you've just been so faithful, Mike, and really, I just feel like you've been really like a father figure in my life. So thank you. And
you're welcome.
Also to Lindy and Jonathan, it's funny. It's great to have you. It's like the Avengers align for me. And I haven't yet met Nancy yet, but I'm sure someday I'd like to meet her one day. But I just really wanted to just honor all of you because it's really been instrumental in shaping who I am, and honestly, it's really been a work of love. I feel you take the time to listen to, I feel like I've been through like a teenager phase where I complain and I don't understand it and I wrestle and all that sort of thing. So yeah, thank you firstly, really, 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 really appreciate it. Yeah, but my question is this, and it's a bit of a paradox, I guess. So we use the word restoration, and I feel like I get that, but then the other word is like an upgrade. And I feel like in one sense, yeah, everything's going to come back to how it was. And I know we sort of sit outside of time, and I guess the simple way to put it is the best is yet to come, or the best has come already. So what are your thoughts on, like upgrade versus restoration?
Yeah, sure. The way I see it is we're not going to be restored back to what it was. We're going to be restored to what it should be. So it will be an upgrade because there is this ascension. If Adam and Eve had not chosen their path of independence, they would have gone on a journey of ascension into full sonship. And that's the journey that we're on. So ultimately, I do believe it is going to be way, way more than what it was in the beginning, because obviously we're now thousands of years later. So we're in a place where in history, things are going to manifest according to our time in history. So I do think upgrade or maturity into sonship is going to take place, which will take it way beyond where it was. So I don't want to go back to the New Testament church. I don't want to go back to the garden. I want to go to where it should be at this point in time in our history, if it hadn't gone wrong, and therefore we'll get the restoration of everything of where we should be, not where we were or where it was. Now, from God's perspective, it's all now. So, outside of time and space. But for us, we do live within this realm and we're connecting multidimensionally. Therefore, I think what we're actually beginning to see and we're beginning to engage is sonship revealing abilities, which, yes, may restore some of the abilities with sound and light and things which have been lost, but will take the level of consciousness into a creative sense, that we are ascending into creative sonship and where that is going to go. So I think, yeah, the word restoration, I think you have to frame it in a way that doesn't limit it, but makes it limitless, because God's got so much more for us to enter into because he's limitless, and therefore I don't see anytime soon that I'm going to stop growing or maturing at all, because, I'm not doing the things that even Jesus did all the time. So, there's a lot more to go. But that's the way I would see it. But, I'd certainly throw it open to anyone else to give a perspective on that. So, anyone else want to chip in on that one? If not, we'll move on to Leah.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Yay.
Hi.
So glad. I'm wondering, is Nancy still with us? Because I primarily have a question for her.
Okay, I'm here.
Yay. So glad. So first of all, I really want to thank you all for all your sharing, and especially for Nancy. I have been following you since 1.5 years, ever since you came to the conference in Germany, Stuttgart, the Glory Church. And I've been listening to so many of your testimonies, read your book, but each time I listen to them, like my chains are on the ground. I was like, what? My mind has been keep blowing. It's like, oh, so amazing. Like, oh. And I would like to hear, maybe it's one of type of testimony I've been missing. It's like, how do you disciple some of the people? Because not everybody who bought to Jesus and become an evangelist immediately and convert like millions of people. And many people do need long period of time of discipleship. And do you have stories about that? And also I want to know, do you model sometimes Jesus model, like have a circle of 12 disciples and even an inner circle of 3? Like how is your disciple life look like?
Well, I'm in a position of transition in regards to that at the present moment. And people have for 35 years asked if I would agree to mentor them. And unfortunately, for those period of years, I couldn't do it. And the reason why I couldn't was I was gone probably 60% of the time into other nations. And I feel like to be a proper mentor, you have to have regular contact with people. And like I said, I get 1,000 emails every day. And half of the time, if I'm on the road or doing a conference like today, I won't even get around to answering 1 or 2 of them. So, so up until the present moment, I've not really been led in that direction, not because I don't want to do it, but because I just don't have the time to invest it. I don't want to say I don't have the time because we have limitless time. I take that back, Father. I'm sorry. So recently, with the shift that's taken place because of COVID, I've been really reevaluating that, and I'm raising up mentoring groups at the present moment. And in the fall, I'm going to begin to do mentoring online. Part of the reason for that is, I hate to even bring this up, but like I am in my 70s. And even though I'm in my 70s, one of the words of the Lord that he gave me was that he's restoring the dew of our youth. He's restoring longevity, and he's bringing us into divine positioning to actually actuate in our own life the restoration of our immortality. And so as being 70, I probably have, I can truthfully say, and my kids will agree with this, my children and my grandchildren cannot keep up with me. And the reason for that is I'm so full of energy because of frequency combined with the frequency of love from the heart of the Lord that I really literally do not run out of energy. But at the present time, since I've been putting together the global strategy groups, literally for 2.5 weeks, I was on Zoom from 4 o'clock in the morning till 2 o'clock the next morning without stopping. And the reason for that was I was fulfilling the vision that he gave me about putting the dominoes side by side so that they could all fulfill their divine purpose. Eventually, that is going to slow down because my position in there is not to mentor everyone and lead the groups. My position is to show them how to come before the Father, to stand face to face with Jesus so that they can get the strategies for themselves. So my eventual, within probably by Christmas, I'm going to work myself out of that because at the present moment, leadership is arising in each one of those groups that can do that again. My purpose at the present moment is to bring people into higher levels of revelatory understanding. And I do that through the frequency by bringing them into a position of being born again, into a higher level. Because every time that we go through that process, we go through a matrix. And that matrix does produce a born again and again experience. So in answer to your question, the Lord put it on my heart in the fall of this year to, we're doing several small group meetings. One of them will be limited to 24, 2 of them will be limited to 12. And the purposes for those are to mentor the leaders of the global strategy groups and to mentor people that the Lord puts his finger on as far as being able to maximize the benefits of what I have to give them. So my encouragement to you, Lee, is if you want to get involved with that, contact the Global Ascension Network office and ask Shannon to put your name on a list. Eventually, we're going to expand that. Now, I think because of the technology currently being offered through the internet, that it is giving us the opportunity to do a whole lot more with a whole lot less travel. And so when I say that I'm on Zoom meetings from 4 in the morning until 2 in the morning, that is currently focused on the international global strategy groups. But as I release myself, or as the Lord releases me from that and turns it over to the people that he's put in charge of all of those, my purpose then is to begin to mentor and to also complete the writing on my second book, which is called Walking the Limitless Life. And so all I can say is put your name on the list and we'll see what the Lord has to say about it. At the current moment, those positions have all been filled by people that I've had long-term 25, 30-year relationships with, because they've pretty much demanded that I set up mentoring groups. But it is God, and he is wanting me to give away everything that I have, because the more that I give away, the more that it comes back. And that's in regards even to energy and the capacity to walk the limitless life. So if I can give that away to other people, then the next level of revelation comes. So I think that eventually that's going to involve mentoring through podcasting and things like that. And I've actually been looking into doing that maybe on a weekly basis. But currently, the only way that I can mentor people is through Global Ascension Network. I do every other week a webinar and twice a month a teaching in regards to going ever higher in the development of our union with the divine nature. So for the interim time, I would recommend that. Are you a part of Global Ascension Network? Okay, you have a corporate group that you're ascending with on a regular basis? Okay, so have you been participating in the webinars and the teachings that we're doing online?
Yes, all of that.
Okay, yeah, you just disappeared from my screen, so just asking.
Yes,
Yeah.
all of that.
I think what Mike said about the Lord raising up fathers to father this up and coming generation is when I say I'm in transition, that means I'm moving into the capacity to be able to handle all of that. And I think that eventually, because of rich time, I'll be able to do it, even though at the present moment, I don't see how I can't handle one more thing at this present moment. But by fall, I think I'll be released from and the global strategy groups are multi-level. So basically, each one of the 7 people that are positioned in those original 7 blocks, down from them, there comes 7 more blocks. And each one of them are going to be held accountable for bringing in the tiers, because there are several tiers that are involved with that. But I think my place is to establish it and get it up and going. And that's what I did with Global Ascension Network. I established it, got it up and going. Now we have people from all over the world that are ascending almost 24 hours a day around the globe. And some of those groups have as many as 10 different nations represented in one group. So once it's established, then I turn it over to my daughter, who does a much better job of administrating than I do. And I go on to the next thing. And so now the global strategy groups are going to evolve, and then I'm going to go on to the next thing, because that's my place, is not to exercise authority or ownership over anything that I'm building, but to give that authority and ownership away to the people that are emerging At my last Quantum Shift conference, we had 7 internationally recognized speakers that probably all of you would know their names. But for the conference, we had 18 speakers. And I broke down sessions and gave all of my leaders that have really been exemplary in the last year teaching. And one of the things that I found was they carried something I needed to learn about, and the other people needed to learn about it too. So if we have the same 5 to 10 different speakers at every conference, we're limiting ourselves, because each person, one of the speakers at that conference got upset. And he said, "Why do you have so many speakers at this conference?" And I said, "Because every single one of them are carrying something that is infinitely important for us to be able to absorb so that we can become more complete. And if somebody doesn't give them a platform from which they can disseminate the priceless thing they're carrying, then it stays inside of them, and it doesn't get utilized in the way that the Lord wants it to be utilized by the whole body of Christ." So mentoring, I know that this is one of Mike's great strengths, is mentoring. Up until the present time, I really haven't been able to do that. And even in regards to taking people on trips and things with me, people always say, "Well, do you travel by yourself?" And I said, for the last 20 years, yes. And the reason for that is, number one, I'm never by myself. The only time I'm by myself is when I'm on the plane. When I get there, all of a sudden I have all these helpers that are wanting to do everything for me. But people would say, "Well, I want to go with you." And I said, "It isn't that I don't want to take you. The problem is, when you're dealing with heads of nations and presidents of nations, the security measures that you have to go through to gain access to go and do all that are like huge. And then you get into the situation where you got to have more taxis to carry everybody around. You got to go through all these security measures. And if you don't take the people with you to go into all of those offices, then they feel like they're being left out. And then I spend my time in the office with the president worrying about what are all of my intercessors doing, because I know I can feel they want to be there, but the truth is they just really can't be. So in the fulfillment, it isn't that I'm wanting to keep all that for myself. It's just that it becomes a real task to take people with me on those kinds of trips. So a second thing about having people with me and around me all the time is, I'm very much like Lindy in that I cannot do a conference without having intense time alone with the Lord. And for my conferences, especially for the last 6 or 7 years, I spend all night before a conference up groaning, and it's very loud. So people can't stay in the same house with me, or they can't go to sleep, and then they wake up the next day and they're all wrung out. So for what I've been called to do for the last 20, 21 years, I really had to do on my own. But now I'm raising up other people and they're being thrust into that position. So mentoring is a good thing. And I know that it's something that the Lord is really leading me into. Probably it'll be through podcasting or something like that, just because of the travel situation. So sorry, I didn't mean to take so much time, but to everything there is a time and a season. And I think now is the time to take everything inside of me and pour it into everybody that I can. Not because I'm planning on leaving anytime soon. Actually, I don't think we really even have to die, but anyway, that's neither here nor there. Let's get to the next question.
Thank you, Nancy. I'm sorry, Daniel, but the time's going on and we need to stop this session so that we can start the next one in just a few minutes. So you've got about 10 minutes for coffee or whatever you want to do, and then we'll be back at 10 o'clock in the evening UK time.
Okay, see ya.
Thank you, Nancy.